what I wanted to look at is, why are we buying? What are we trying to fill? What's missing in our lives that we think the stuff is going to fix? I was giving this example. I went on a shopping trip recently with a family member who's emotionally challenging for me. And I didn't prep myself. I didn't say, this is going to be a hard day. This is going to bring up a bunch of old stuff. And I found myself like shopping. And I got in my car with the bags and I had a stuff hangover. I was like, why did I buy this? And I was like, oh, because you were avoiding the emotions. You didn't say, this is going to be hard. You got $100 to spend. Like, you can't spend these feelings away. And that's what I wanted to dive into, is what we're trying to fill with this constant buying.
Well, hello there and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I want to ask you a question. Over the pandemic, did you find yourself doing a lot of retail therapy, like virtual online shopping because you were bored, because you were home all the time? Or, like me, did you finally look around your house and go, oh my God, I haven't done anything to this joint in years. Why is there piles of crap everywhere? Anybody? Well, if you're nodding your head yes, then this interview today you're going to love. It's with Tracy McCubbin, who is a decluttering expert. So she's an entrepreneur, she's a CEO, but she's also the author of Making Space Clutter-Free, the last book on decluttering you'll ever need. That came out in 2019. And she has a new book that came out this past year, Make Space for Happiness, How to Stop Attracting Clutter and Start Magnetizing the Life You Want, which I think is so interesting because, of course, our space reflects what's going on in our mind. And also there's a whole energetic vibe to the way that we keep our space. So she was a wonderful interview. I actually met her through one of my closest friends, Lara Riggio, because I think she helped declutter Lara a couple of years ago. Anyway, she has great ideas for us. I hope that you love this interview with Tracy as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. Tracy McCubbin, is that how you say it?
That's how you say it.
I love it so much. Welcome to the Terri Cole Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I have so very many questions. So just having anyone, it's funny, I feel like everyone has their own variation of their clutteriness, and only certain special people are not cluttery, right? So my husband is a pile-upper. So we have piles in our house. I'm someone that if it can be in a drawer, even if that drawer is a complete disaster, if it's out of my eyeball sight, even though I hate that eventually, of course, I got to do the drawers, but there's something about, like, I can't have a cluttered kitchen. Like if I wake up and there's stuff on the counter, everything has to come down and, but we all have our way of sort of managing clutter. But what I love about the work that you've been doing for years is you help us make meaning, like understand what we're doing and sort of get to the root of it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about. So thanks for being you. We can start there.
You're welcome.
All right. So one thing I was just stalking your Instagram, and one thing that I saw that kind of made me laugh, but it really made me think. You were talking about the X test. So would you just tell us the story quickly about your beloved jacket?
So the X test, and I have to give credit to apartment therapy because that's where I first read about it. And I was like, oh, so basically the idea is if you leave something at an X's house, is it worth it to go back and get it? And I tell this story. I was dating this not so great guy. And it was one of those like, oh, there's a lot of red flags, but there's one or two boxes that gets checked. So I'm going to keep giving it the college try, And finally I was like, this is just, I can't, this is not working. And I walked away and I left at his house a vintage leather jacket with a gray fox fur collar that I loved. I found it at a thrift store for $25. And about 2 weeks later, I saw him with his new paramour and she was wearing my jacket. And I was like, and I had to do, like, I was like, oh, that's a good jacket. But I was so happy to have him out of my life. I was so, have the jacket. I would
Yep.
rather give up that jacket than bring this energy back into my life. And it was such a great litmus test for how things are energetic, because
Mm,
especially when they're connected to people, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is helping them after someone's passed away,
mm,
mostly parents because of the age we're all at.
mm.
But a lot of people don't understand that when you keep a lot of stuff from exes and people who have passed, that energetic connection is still there.
Yeah.
It's still there. And it's never about erasing the past or letting go of memories, but are you still beholden to this person? Like if you didn't want them sleeping in your bed, why do you want their stuff in your closet?
Right. It's such a great way of looking at it. I remember when I was young, I had this bracelet that my mother had given me that she had gotten for being in her best friend's wedding. And it was like a silver cuff bracelet with my mother's initial, monogram on it. And I wore it every single day from third grade until college. And then I jumped off a bridge, like I was swimming. In upstate New York, you jump off bridges. And I lost it. And I was devastated in a way that, I mean, I was also young, but I cried for like 3 days straight. And we looked, and there was like a search party for my friggin' bracelet. And yet the reality is, like, my mother is still alive. That was many, many years ago when I was in college. My mother's 85. Of course, it doesn't change the relationship, but we can become so attached to things, especially if you still have the people in your life and you love them. And yet, in a way, it was a lesson of like, it's okay. There'll be other meaningful things. Nothing is more important than my actual relationship with my mother, obviously, who I'm blessed enough that she's still here. So there was another thing that really struck me that you had written about, and then I want to get into the book that came out last year. But you had talked about, people are really into talking about decluttering, right? They're especially at the front of the year and whatever. But you basically talk about the fact that we can't effectively declutter or even approach decluttering if we don't talk about the acquisition cycle. And I have to say that was kind of a wake up. So please, let's talk about that, shall we?
Yeah, so I've been a professional declutterer for 16 years. I've had my business for a very long time. I have 12 employees. We are booked all the time. And my first book, Making Space Clutter Free, was about why we couldn't let go. And then all of a sudden, after doing it a long time, I'm like, people are calling me again and again. And then the pandemic hit, and I saw those packages on everybody's doorsteps. And I was like, we we can declutter all we want, but if we keep buying at this rate, it's just a circle. And what I wanted to look at is, why are we buying? What are we trying to fill? What's missing in our lives that we think the stuff is going to fix? And
Mm,
full disclosure, I'm not telling everybody to never shop again. I love a cute purse. I like a nice pair of shoes, but I was giving this example. I went on a shopping trip recently with a family member who's emotionally challenging for me. We went to the outlet malls, and I didn't prep myself. I didn't say, this is going to be a hard day. This is going to bring up a bunch of old stuff. And I found myself like shopping, 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 shopping. And I got in my car with the bags, and I had a stuff hangover. I was like,
mm.
why did I buy this? And I was like, oh, because you were avoiding the emotions. You were feeling all these old things. You didn't set yourself up for success. You didn't say, this is going to be hard. You got $100 to spend. Like, you can't spend these feelings away. And that's what I wanted to dive into, is what we're trying to fill with this constant buying.
It's such a great, I mean, being a therapist and from a psychological point of view, it's such a great question, because when we think about shopping, if we're doing it as a way to mood alter, right? If we're doing it as a numbing activity, or if we're doing it to fill sort of the bucket that only like facing our shit will actually fill, we know that it can't go on forever. But for some people, it does. Like, we do see the whole acquisition thing to the extreme. You have hoarding, right? But then you also have shopaholism that doesn't look like hoarding, because I've had many of my therapy clients who have been shopaholics, where the shame that they have of having so many things hanging in their closet with tags on it that have been there for multiple years, like not just 9 months, but been there for multiple years. And again, of course, from a therapeutic standpoint, we need to look at what is the secondary gain, right? What do you get to not face, not feel, not experience by continuing to try to shop away your feelings? What is it that you think that you need? So there really is a lot of fodder for therapy when we talk about shopaholicism. But when we talk about clutter, this is something that I think is more universal. Like, I don't think I know anyone
Yes.
who doesn't struggle with clutter.
Yes. Having done this for 16 years and thousands of homes, I want to remind people that it's never about your home being perfect. It's never about your home looking perfect, good on Instagram, good for friends. It's about your home supporting you. Does your home work for you? Can you find what you need to find? Can you cook a healthy meal? Can you get dressed in the morning without crying because your closet is such a disaster? That's the point that I've come from. And the idea of clutter is kind of different for everybody. Like in my household, there are two of us. We don't have that much stuff. There are people who are a family of five. You're going to have more stuff. There's no way to say, oh, you need 30 books and this many sweaters. But if you feel like you don't own your stuff anymore, but your stuff owns you, that's when it's not working anymore. Are you paying for an outside storage unit? Can't park your car in your garage? Do you have rooms in your house you can't use for their intended purpose? That's the things that I want people to pay attention to.
Right. Those are really, though, and Tracy bring up such a great point, because those are really quality of life issues. I mean, on a high level, right? But they really are. Like, if you have a room that's so filled with crap you can't use it, that's quality of life issue. There could be more space to meditate, to luxuriate, to whatever it is that you have, a hobby room that you actually use, as opposed to having more storage. And why do we love our stuff so much, though? Like, why do we want to hold on to it so badly? I wonder, if I get a new mug, let's just say, because we all have way more mugs than we need, my husband will always be like, and I try not to buy anymore, right? Because you only use the same friggin' ones that you use every friggin' day, and you know this. We're so
Yep.
habitual, like we all do the same thing. But if I get something new, he's like, okay, so you're going to get rid of some of the mugs that are in there, and I'm always like, shut up, you have stuff. Like, I get so mad. Like, why are you trying to take away my mugs? And of course, the mugs I want to throw away are all the ones he uses, because he uses like the little demi-test one, and I want a mug that
Yeah.
holds like 72 ounces of coffee.
I think it's interesting. I think it's a couple things. I think one, civilization, we didn't collect stuff really until the 50s, till post World War II. So it was a way to show that you were part of the middle class and that you had money now. So that's when collecting got to really be a thing. And then goods got cheap, right? Shipped to Asia. You could buy, like, why, you can buy 5 t-shirts for $20 now, and who cares if you throw them away? I mean, we care and the planet cares, but we've gotten in this. But I also think that we give our stuff so much meaning. And in a way, I always say, like, that's the good news, because you imbued all this meaning in it so you can take it away. The example you brought up of your mother's bracelet, one of the things that I say to people when we're dealing with the stuff from someone who's passed away, I'm like, you don't really want the stuff. You want the connection. You don't want that to go away. And you feel like if you have a garage full of their furniture, they're still with you.
Right.
And what'll happen is people keep a whole bunch, and then it'll become a burden. And then they're in this very complicated, like, I'm so resentful of all the stuff I kept, but I love that person. And it's just this whole spiral. And so it's really about the meaning that we attach. And can we find that meaning somewhere else?
Yes. And we definitely can, because when you think about, there's more meaning to a degree in telling stories about the person, in sharing about their history, in, interviewing the people you love while they're alive, so that those stories can be handed down throughout the family. Like, when we think about meaning, it's really about the person themselves and our connection to the person. But I do see how stuff represents certain things. And I think that what you're saying is true. I believe that we can change our mind if we can acknowledge what you said about true connection, because that is what we're talking about. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your most recent book, Make Space for Happiness, How to Stop Attracting Clutter and Start Magnetizing the Life You Want. Because this is it's not a total departure, but it's a bit of a departure in some ways, or maybe it's just more of an expanding on the meaning that you always had in decluttering before. But can you tell us about why you wrote this book and the meaning behind?
Sure. So my first book was all about decluttering and why we couldn't let go and the stories that we told ourselves about our stuff and how it was so important. And then as I started to look at like clients that kept coming back, and, I got a couple phone calls during the pandemic that was like, remember all that stuff we decluttered? Well, I bought it again and then some. And I was like, there's something here. And, I've dealt with a lot of people with shopping addiction and hoarders and all that, but I just had this vision, and I started to do a lot of research into sort of the science of happiness and fulfillment and connection. And I started to see it. It's just silly, but it's like the only way I can describe it. I see like we have these little puzzle pieces missing from ourselves. Like we don't feel self-confidence, or we don't feel true connection. And so these little pieces are missing. And then we're trying to like fill them with stuff like moisturizer and sunscreen and eye cream and, all the anti-aging. And you're like, I still don't feel good about myself. So it's like we started magnetizing the stuff to fix ourselves, and it wasn't working. So how can we fix those parts of ourselves, heal them, whatever the word is, without the stuff? I had a consult this last week with this lovely couple in their 70s, adorable, so sweet. And she self-confessed. She was like, oh, I developed a shopping problem over the pandemic. And I was like, well, tell me, kind of tell me what your experience was. And she said, well, right before the pandemic, I retired of my job for 35 years, which was in a big office and very social. I don't go to my church in person anymore. And I stopped playing bridge. And I was like, well, your whole tribe is gone. Like, no wonder the Amazon guy is your best friend. And she was like, right. And I was like, first thing, can you go back to bridge? And her husband's like, there's a game this afternoon. I'll drive her.
He's like, please.
please. But these like, if the connection that you're missing, can you find a way? I could do a whole seminar on anti-aging products and the whole messaging around that, right? That if you're looking for some cream or lotion to fix you, where are you going to get that that's going to be lasting? I see all the time. Recently, I've had a spate of grandparents as clients, and the amount that they're shopping for their grandkids. And I'm like, they just want to see you. Like, go bake cookies with them. They don't need the stuff. They don't need the stuff. You want to feel connected to them when you're away, but then you just become this gumball machine of toys.
Yes. And really, we're also training people to treat us a particular way. We are managing expectations, but not in a great way. Because again, when you overgive in that way, ultimately you end up feeling resentful, like they only see me as a checkbook, or they only see me as the gift giver. And you're like, yeah, but who set it up that way from the time they were born? Because it's not about the stuff unless you make it about the stuff.
Exactly. I was at a big campaign over the holidays, like normalize asking people what they want for a gift. To be honest, Terri, it's a little bit about like, tell people what you like in the bedroom. Like this idea that people are supposed to be able to read your mind and know the way you like your toes sucked, not to be graphic, or, but how do this expectation that people should just know what you want and get you the perfect gift. It's like, you're setting everybody up for failure. Yeah. Why is it hard for you to say to me, or, just like, oh my gosh, I love these candles. My birthday's coming up. I'm just saying, why is that bad? Like, to me, and the people who got most upset were the gift givers. They were
Hmm.
like, well, I like to, and I spend so much time. And I was like, oh, because this is about you.
Right.
This is you're giving a gift because you want something,
Yep.
not about the gift.
Yep.
So,
And not about the getter, not about the
nope,
receiver, where you're like,
nope.
I'm the best gift giver. It's funny. I have a, maybe, I don't even know if it's a weird relationship to gift giving, but I'm not much of a gift giver in respect to, I just want experiences. Years ago, I said to my husband, just please don't, babe, I don't want anything. Like I literally don't. What I want, my love language is quality time, words of affirmation. What else? I mean, probably all of them,
Physical
just not
touch. Yeah.
physical touch.
Just not,
Exactly.
yeah, just not gift giving. I'm the same way. I was like, gift giving? What? That's even a thing? Like, that was so far down the list for me.
Yes. And I feel like with the fact that we all do have so much stuff, certainly, I know that pandemic, it isn't just the client you just shared about, lots of us. It was a way to be attached to the outside world. It was a way to have something to look forward to. And a lot of us also spent times in our homes. I'm sure the sales of your book exploded during the pandemic, I imagine, because I hadn't made changes in my house in years because had an apartment in the city. I was going in between. I was traveling all the time. I was supposed to be going on a book tour. That didn't happen, obviously, because it was a pandemic. So I just sat in my chair and did a book tour virtually, which was great. But suddenly, everything that isn't organized, that is bothering you, that you don't like, that you're like, why did I even ever buy that end table or whatever the things are? You're just looking at everything so much. So I can see how there's sort of this big resurgence and people wanting to create space that makes you feel good.
Yeah, I think that we realized at some point our homes were just a way station, right? You dropped your bags off, you ran out, you went to dinner. But at the end of the day, our homes are what support us. You rest in them, you refuel yourself. You know, you brought up a really interesting point about you needing your kitchen counters cleared. My husband's been away for a bit for work, and his daughter was living with us, and she went back to her mom's for a bit. And so the pantry had gotten super out of control. And so on Saturday, I was like, you know what? Nobody's home. Let me declutter and get my pantry organized. And what I realized was pre-pantry organization, we had been ordering in so much because we were both like, look at the pantry and we're like, I don't know. I can't. I don't know. I don't know. Let's just order in. Let's just order in. Since I've organized it and since I kind of got rid of expired food, we're like, we've cooked like the last 4 nights. It's like, I know where everything is. And it was just this reaffirmation of your home is a tool. Bottom line, it's a tool.
Yep.
How does it support you? Does it take away from you or does it add to you? And that's the important thing.
I love this reframe about your home sort of supporting you or depleting you. And I never, honestly, Trace, I never looked at it that way before, but it just resonates as so true that when I'm more organized over the pandemic, one of my sisters works for me, and she was like, your closets are just ridiculous. And I had like this I have two guest rooms, and one was very small that like no guests ever stayed in. And she was like, this needs this whole room. Let's just make this a walk-in closet for you. I was like, oh my God, yes. And I cannot tell you, when she organized all of my jewelry, all of my clothing, I could see everything because again, I have to be on camera all the time. And it's like, yeah, my sister's like, dude, you can't keep wearing like the same jacket. Like you need to like wear the clothes you have. You can't be lazy. You have to. I was like, I can't, I don't know where anything is. How much like that positive ripple effect of decluttering and organizing continues to this day, and that was 2 years ago, to add to the quality of my life. It lessens my daily frustration. So basically, looking at it from the frame that you sort of put it in, that walk-in closet room supports my life being better than it was before, being easier, being less frustrating. Just like you're saying, like, listen, if you're lucky enough to be able to order in all the time, great. But it's not, you weren't doing it because you really wanted to. Part of what you realized is you were doing it because the pantry was such a disaster that you were like, oh, that's overwhelming. Forget it. I didn't want to look at it.
Yeah.
And I totally get that that vibe, right? We can order in once in a while, but if it's because, and in that instance, the pantry was not supporting you, you know?
Exactly. I have a lot of people come to me, I want to get organized, I want to get decluttered. And I always start with why? Why? Well, I'm lazy and I'm a bad housekeeper. I'm like, not with me. I don't even want to have that conversation. What do you hope to gain? Well, I want to clean out my guest room so my friend can come and visit and not stay in a hotel. I want to start cooking healthier meals. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
cry when I get dressed in the morning because my closet, like all that. And once we figure out the why that they're doing it, then it becomes, it's still work, but we're working towards something and we're
Right.
doing it for a positive outcome. Like that, don't give me that, like I'm lazy and a bad housekeeper. I'm not even having that conversation. It's
No.
just useless to anyone. And so, and a lot of times people come to me around sort of wanting to eat healthier. And I'm like, great, but if your counters are out, you can't. Like, where are you going to prep vegetables? You can't. You're not set up for success. So how do we set you up for success?
Yeah. I love the idea of that. There was something else that I saw a video that you had done that really made me laugh because I feel like for people who are natural kind of clutterers, this is the first thing we think of. You were like, dude, you don't need to go out and buy more containers and baskets and crap to declutter. You trust me. You have everything you need. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. The first thing I think of when I think of, all right, I'm really going to tackle this room. And then I'm like, okay, what do I need?
Yeah. What do I got to
Yep.
buy? In a weird way, it feels like going and buying the bins is a solvable problem. Oh, if I do that, then I've solved this problem instead of facing, which sometimes is really difficult. Like you said, we do all these avoidance therapies, have that extra
Mhm.
2 or 3 glasses of wine, the cookie, watch, scroll on TikTok, whatever the thing to avoid. And I feel
Mhm.
like that going and shopping for baskets and bins is another way of avoiding the work you got to do.
Yep. It's avoiding just doing it and being able to part with your stuff, the stuff you haven't worn. Like, what kind of, do you have any, not hard and fast rules, but any kind of rules where you go when you're going through your closet? I know Marie Kondo's like, if it doesn't bring you joy, but do you have one where you're like, if you haven't
I
worn
will
it and
say, yeah. I'll say this, Terri. A client of mine once said to me, and this made me laugh so hard. She goes, "Is guilt tinged sentimentality the same thing as joy?" I was like,
you were
it
like,
just made me laugh.
not
Yeah,
exactly.
look, not exactly. I mean, here's the thing. I would say to people, when's the last time you wore it? Have you put it on and taken it off a couple times and not gone out in the house in it? If you saw it in the store again today, would you buy it? Like,
Mm,
that's the thing. And also accepting, this one always gets a lot, but I'm not a big fan of like keeping clothes you can't fit into anymore. I
mhm.
think it's like it's sending a message. And, there's also, I'm 57. My body's changed. Like I can't
Yep.
wear it just doesn't fit. Like gravity has moved stuff around and, and and to keep things that are going to make me feel bad. Why do I want that in my closet? Why do
Right.
I want to face that?
Yep.
And so I have a lot of those conversations like, would you buy it again? Would you wear it? I worked with somebody recently whose husband had passed and she was at a point where she wanted to start dating again. And so the greatest for everything, I was like, would you wear this on a date with a new fella? And she was like, absolutely not. And I'm like, out, you know,
Right. You're like, get out.
get
Another thing,
out.
another thing I wanted to ask you about, because I think that this is really important too, is you say decluttering does not mean having no stuff. And you shared a little bit about your altar and your sacred space. So can you talk a little bit about the appropriateness of that?
Yeah, that it's that. Like, I'm not coming in and saying, you need stuff. We need lots of stuff. I need tools to cook in the kitchen. I need clothes to wear. I need towels to dry off with. And then sometimes we just have stuff that we love.
Yeah.
We have stuff that feels beautiful to us. And I love cookbooks. I love to eat lunch on a Saturday and flip through a cookbook. It's just a joy of mine. So I have a lot of them and I cook from them and I enjoy them. And so I had a woman at a book signing when my first book came out, and she was very upset. She stood up at the end, and she had recently lost her mother, and she was clearly still deep, deep, deep in grief. And she was saying how the night her mother died, this woman had swept everything off of her mother's nightstand. So it was medicine bottles and Kleenex and pens, and then she sort of recreated it on her dresser. So every morning she was waking up and reliving
Mm-hmm.
basically the worst night of her life. And I
Right.
was like,
Right.
what, tell me why, like why? And she was like, it was so hard to lose her. And I said, but can we replace that? Can you replace it with your favorite vase that was hers, and put her favorite flower in, or your favorite picture? You can still acknowledge and go through the
Right.
process and communicate with her, but you don't have to keep the bad stuff. Like,
Right.
and I will say, and this is going to resonate with somebody, I often find the more traumatic a relationship was, especially parent child, if you're an adult, the more people keep to sort of
Yeah.
remind them either of a traumatic childhood or what they missed, and I'm like, out,
Yeah.
out, out, out.
I think that's from a psychological perspective. I think that is very true. It's like I after my father passed away, I had done a lot of work on while he was alive on creating some kind of a relationship. It was like he was emotionally unavailable type of a person, had 4 daughters, probably should have had sons, whatever. But I'd worked. I was like, this mother effer is going to know me. Like, and if that means I do all the work, I do not care. Like, I need that in my life for myself. So I stopped being like, why isn't he different? And I was like, what do I need to do to make the connection I want with my one and only father? What do I have to do? So me and one of my sisters sort of went that route, and then my older ones didn't go that route. And when he passed, there was, there's a different kind of grief because you're unresolved, and there was all of this desire to put like pictures in the casket and do all of these things again as a substitute for the healing that I'm sure they wish they had done. And so I can see that to be true, that there's this meaning that we put on the things, because for some of us, things were the replacement, right? So if you were raised by a parent the way my father was, he would try to love you with money because he was emotionally unavailable, and be like, well, send you a check for this. And I would always try to, once I became an adult, I was like, no, man, you're definitely not paying me off. So I don't need money. I'm fine. Even when I was broke, I was like, I'm fine, because I knew if I took it, it would be the replacement that I didn't want it to be. So I could see that being very accurate for stuff as well.
Yeah, it's just, I have a friend who owns a funeral home, and
Mm.
he always says the people who are the most upset at the funerals are the ones who had the worst relationship. And I see that people keeping all that. So, what I always tell people when they're like, do I need to start decluttering? I want to start the process. I always say, like, just spend a couple days walking through your house and pay attention. I don't go in that room very often. Why don't I go in there?
Mhm.
This stresses me out. My laundry room, whatever. Just pay attention to what's working and what's not. And
Yeah.
that's going to tell you where to start. Don't beat yourself up. Don't just like, oh, right. That room is all full of, my mother who's passed things. I did a coaching session with this woman, and she was lovely, and she'd had like 4 people in 4 years, mother, her
Mm.
father, had like really lost everybody. And she was still going, and she was the recipient. So she was going through everybody's stuff, and
Mm.
she was sort of at this point, like, I don't know what to keep anymore. And, and she did. And then she started to talk about, she had recently found recipes. Her grandmother had written them, and her mom, and I think she was Greek. And so some were really old and not, and she just lit up. Like, she was like, they were so amazing. And I started cooking them, and I'm going to cook. And I was like, look, that's how you should feel. And can you, because she kept saying like, well, I want to leave things for my kids to know their grandparents. And I'm like, turn that into a book.
Yeah.
That's how they will know their grandparents. They're not going to know their grandparents from a National Geographic magazine that they saved 100 of. A cookbook of their handwritten recipes, that's where
Yes.
they know them from. And so that's the thing. And, and again, in some ways, I think she was very, very oversimplified. But I do think that this idea of, does it spark joy that Marie always talks about, I just think it goes a little deeper.
Yeah.
If it doesn't spark joy, what's it doing to you? And she never
Exactly.
addresses that.
That's true, but that's important. Okay, I have one last question for you, and then I want you to tell us where everyone can find you. Personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle, and how have you overcome it if you have?
Ooh. So for me, I am the child of a hoarder. My dad is an extreme hoarder. And so my biggest boundary is when someone needs my help, I let them treat me badly.
Mhm.
It's something, especially clients, like, but they need my help. They don't know what they're doing. It's really hard for them. I sort of push my, like, no, you can't speak to me that way. There's no
Mhm.
reason for that. And that's the biggest one. And I think it comes from, I sort of realized recently, I don't know if this is the right word, but being raised by a parent who was a hoarder, he groomed us, he trained us to keep his secrets.
Yep.
And I think very much like, I'm like, oh, like alcoholic parent, drug, like, oh,
Yep.
that's what happened. So I try and make it all okay. So that's my big life lesson.
Right on. Thank you so much for sharing it. That is beautiful. So, Trace, where can people find you?
Absolutely. The place we have the most fun is on Instagram at Tracy_McCubbin. I do these 5-minute decluttering challenges. It's just a super supportive, great community. We're over on TikTok too, but I like the Instagram people a little bit
Me too.
more. And then TracyMcCubbin.com links to both the books, and we've lots of stuff going on. I've got a newsletter. I don't clutter your inbox, but keep you updated, and it's really fun. It's really fun.
Thank you so, so much. We'll put all those links, you guys, in the show notes, as we always do. Trace, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.